Here is a number that genuinely surprises most people when they hear it for the first time. National health data shows that more than 40% of American adults have insufficient vitamin D levels, and among older adults specifically, some studies suggest that number climbs even higher in certain populations, affecting the vast majority of people over 65. And vitamin D is just one nutrient on a much longer list of things your body needs more of, not less, as you age. Today we are covering 7 vitamins and minerals that become increasingly important after 60 and stick around until the end, because the 7th nutrient on this list is one almost nobody thinks to check, and a shortage of it can quietly affect something as basic and important as your ability to fight off a common cold. Before we get into it, if you find value in clear, science-based health information like this, take a moment to subscribe to Longevity Insight. This channel exists to help you understand your body's changing needs and stay strong, sharp, and independent as the years go on. And we release new videos regularly covering exactly the kind of practical nutrition guidance that gets overlooked in a rushed doctor's visit. It takes 2 seconds, and it means you will not miss what is coming next. Now let us talk about your nutritional needs after 60. Before we walk through the specific nutrients, it helps to understand why nutritional needs shift so significantly as we age in the first place. Several physiological changes conspire to make deficiency more likely, even in people eating what seems like a perfectly reasonable diet. Stomach acid production tends to decline with age, and since stomach acid is required to properly break down and absorb certain nutrients, particularly vitamin B12, this alone can create a meaningful absorption gap. Appetite often decreases somewhat with age as well, sometimes due to changes in taste and smell, sometimes due to medications, and sometimes simply due to eating alone more often, all of which can reduce overall nutrient intake even when someone is not consciously trying to eat less. Certain medications commonly prescribed to older adults, including some for acid reflux, diabetes, and blood pressure, can interfere with the absorption or utilization of specific nutrients as a side effect, and skin becomes less efficient at producing vitamin D from sunlight exposure as we age, adding yet another layer to an already complicated picture. On top of all of this, changes in kidney function that come with age can affect how efficiently the body retains or excretes certain minerals, meaning the same dietary intake that was perfectly adequate at 40 may no longer be enough at 70, simply because the body is processing and retaining those nutrients somewhat differently. Understanding these mechanisms helps explain why the 7 nutrients we are about to discuss deserve more deliberate attention after 60 than they may have required earlier in life. Nutrient number 1 is vitamin D. This nutrient plays a foundational role in calcium absorption, bone health, immune function, and increasingly, research suggests a role in muscle strength and even mood regulation. The challenge is that vitamin D deficiency becomes remarkably common with age, driven by that reduced skin synthesis we just mentioned, along with less time spent outdoors and often lower dietary intake. Estimates vary considerably depending on the population studied, with some research suggesting anywhere from 20 to as much as 100% of older adults in certain settings, particularly those who are homebound or living in care facilities, have insufficient vitamin D levels, a striking range that underscores just how dependent this nutrient is on individual lifestyle and circumstance. Current national guidelines recommend adults over 70 aim for 800 international units of vitamin D daily, slightly higher than the guideline for younger adults, reflecting just how much more important this nutrient becomes with age. Good dietary sources include fatty fish like salmon and mackerel, egg yolks, and fortified foods like milk and certain cereals. Though for many older adults, particularly those with limited sun exposure, a supplement recommended by a doctor becomes a practical and often necessary way to reach adequate levels. Nutrient number 2 is calcium, working hand in hand with vitamin D to support bone density and reduce fracture risk, a topic we have covered in more depth in a previous video on this channel about foods that support bone health. Beyond bones, calcium also plays an essential role in muscle contraction, nerve signaling, and blood clotting, meaning its importance extends well beyond skeletal health alone. As estrogen levels decline following menopause, women in particular experience accelerated bone loss, making adequate calcium intake, alongside vitamin D and weight-bearing exercise, especially important during this life stage. Dairy products, fortified plant milks, leafy greens, and canned fish eaten with bones like sardines all provide meaningful amounts of calcium, and spreading intake across multiple meals throughout the day tends to support better absorption than consuming it all at once. Nutrient number 3 is vitamin B12, a nutrient we have covered in detail in a previous video on this channel, but one that deserves mention here again given just how significantly absorption changes with age. Vitamin B12 is essential for nerve function, red blood cell production, and cognitive health, and researchers estimate that somewhere between 10 and 15% of adults over 60 have some degree of deficiency, largely due to declining stomach acid production, which is required to release B12 from the proteins in food. This is compounded further by certain medications, including metformin and acid-reducing drugs, both commonly prescribed to older adults. Because B12 is found almost exclusively in animal products, people following vegan or strict vegetarian diets face an additional layer of risk and often need to rely on fortified foods or supplementation to meet their needs regardless of age. Nutrient number 4 is magnesium, sometimes called the forgotten mineral, since it rarely gets the attention that calcium or vitamin D receives, despite being involved in more than 300 different enzymatic reactions throughout the body, including energy production, muscle and nerve function, blood pressure regulation, and even the metabolism of vitamin D itself, meaning a magnesium shortage can indirectly worsen vitamin D status as well. Older adults are at higher risk of magnesium insufficiency due to reduced dietary intake, certain medications including some diuretics and acid reducers, and age-related changes in how efficiently the kidneys retain this mineral. Good sources include leafy green vegetables, nuts and seeds, whole grains, and legumes, making this a nutrient that a genuinely varied, plant-inclusive diet can go a long way towards supporting without necessarily requiring supplementation for most people. Nutrient number 5 is potassium, a mineral that plays a critical role in regulating blood pressure, supporting proper heart rhythm, and maintaining healthy muscle and nerve function. Many older adults do not consume adequate potassium, partly due to lower overall food intake and partly due to diets that lean more heavily on processed foods, which tend to be low in potassium while being high in sodium, creating an imbalance that can contribute to elevated blood pressure over time. Certain medications, including some diuretics, can also affect potassium levels in either direction, which is exactly why potassium is a nutrient worth discussing, specifically with a doctor if you are on blood pressure or heart medications, rather than adjusting intake on your own. Bananas are the famous example, but potatoes, oranges, spinach, and beans all provide substantial amounts of potassium as well, often in higher quantities than people expect. Nutrient number 6 is omega-3 fatty acids, found primarily in fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel, as well as walnuts and flax seeds for those following a plant-based diet. Omega-3s have been extensively studied for their role in heart health, where they appear to help reduce inflammation and support healthy triglyceride levels. And increasingly, research has pointed to a role in supporting brain health and potentially slowing certain aspects of age-related cognitive decline, since these fatty acids are structural components of brain cell membranes themselves. Most Americans across all age groups consume considerably less omega-3 rich seafood than nutrition guidelines recommend, making this a nutrient worth deliberately incorporating into your diet a couple of times a week, rather than assuming it is being adequately covered through general eating habits. And now, nutrient number 7, the one I promised you at the beginning, zinc. This mineral rarely gets discussed in conversations about healthy aging, and yet it plays an essential role in immune function, wound healing, and even the senses of taste and smell, which is precisely why a shortage can show up in surprisingly varied and easy-to-miss ways. Zinc absorption naturally becomes less efficient with age, and this is compounded by the fact that many older adults simply consume less zinc-rich food than they once did, particularly if red meat, one of the richest dietary sources, has become a smaller part of the diet due to changing tastes or health considerations. Certain medications, including some diuretics and drugs used for acid reflux, can further reduce zinc absorption or increase its loss through urine, adding yet another overlapping risk factor to a population already more vulnerable to begin with. A zinc shortage can manifest as a weakened immune response, meaning colds and infections that seem to linger longer or hit harder than they used to, slower healing of cuts and wounds, and in some cases a genuinely diminished sense of taste that can make food seem less appealing, which in turn can contribute to reduced appetite and even further nutritional shortfalls, creating a frustrating cycle that often goes completely unrecognized as stemming from a single correctable mineral deficiency. Good dietary sources include meat, poultry, shellfish, particularly oysters, which are exceptionally concentrated in zinc, along with beans, nuts, and whole grains for those looking for plant-based options. Though it is worth noting that certain compounds in whole grains and legumes can somewhat reduce zinc absorption, making animal sources generally more efficiently absorbed for anyone who includes them in their diet. It is also worth noting how frequently these nutritional gaps overlap in a single person, rather than existing in isolation. Someone with reduced stomach acid, a smaller appetite, and a medication that affects absorption may simultaneously be running low on more than one of the nutrients we are discussing today, and the symptoms of multiple mild deficiencies can blend together into a general sense of low energy and reduced well-being that is easy to attribute to aging itself, rather than to a handful of specific, correctable nutritional gaps working together. This is part of why a broader nutritional review, rather than focusing on just one nutrient at a time, tends to be the more useful approach for many older adults. Now that we have covered all 7 nutrients, let us talk about practical ways to build a diet that genuinely supports these changing needs, rather than simply hoping you are getting enough of everything. Prioritizing whole, minimally processed foods over highly processed alternatives naturally improves the nutrient density of your overall diet, since processed foods tend to be calorie-dense but comparatively poor sources of the vitamins and minerals we have discussed today. Eating a genuinely varied diet, incorporating different colors of vegetables and fruits, different protein sources, and different whole grains throughout the week helps ensure you are not inadvertently missing out on nutrients concentrated in foods you might otherwise skip entirely. For anyone managing a smaller appetite, which becomes increasingly common with age, focusing on nutrient-dense foods becomes especially important, since there is simply less overall volume of food to work with in meeting daily nutritional needs. This might mean choosing a handful of nuts over a bag of chips for a snack, or opting for a piece of fatty fish over a less nutrient-dense protein source at dinner. Small substitutions that meaningfully improve overall nutrient intake without requiring dramatically more food overall. It is also worth having a direct conversation with your doctor about which of these nutrients might be worth actually testing for, rather than guessing based on diet alone. Blood tests for vitamin D and B12 in particular are simple, inexpensive, and widely available, and given how common deficiencies in these 2 nutrients become with age, many doctors recommend including them as part of routine blood work for adults over 60, even in the absence of specific symptoms. If a deficiency is identified, your doctor can help determine the most appropriate approach, whether that means dietary changes, a specific supplement recommendation, or in some cases addressing an underlying cause like a digestive condition or medication interaction that may be contributing to the shortfall in the first place. It is worth emphasizing that supplementation should generally be approached as a targeted response to an identified need, rather than a blanket strategy of taking as many vitamins as possible in hopes of covering all your bases. Some vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D in very high doses, can actually cause harm when taken in excess, and certain supplements can interact with medications commonly prescribed to older adults. This is exactly why working with your doctor to identify actual deficiencies through simple blood testing where appropriate offers a far more precise and genuinely useful approach than simply adding supplements to your routine without any clear indication that they are needed. I want to leave you with this thought before we close. Nutrition is one of those areas of health that quietly shapes so much of how we feel day to day, our energy, our mood, our immune resilience, our bone strength, and our cognitive sharpness, and yet it rarely gets the deliberate attention it deserves, particularly as our body's needs shift with age in ways that are not always obvious from the outside. The 7 nutrients we covered today, vitamin D, calcium, vitamin B12, magnesium, potassium, omega-3 fatty acids, and zinc, are not exotic or hard to find. They are widely available in ordinary foods found in almost any grocery store. What changes after 60 is not so much what your body needs, but how deliberately you may need to seek it out, given the natural shifts in absorption, appetite, and lifestyle that come with this stage of life. If this video gave you something valuable today, I would really appreciate it if you took a moment to leave a comment below and share which of these 7 nutrients you think you might be falling short on. Or let us know if you have already had any of these levels checked by your doctor. Your comments genuinely help this channel reach more people who could benefit from this information, and they help shape what we cover in future videos. If you have a parent, spouse, or friend over 60 who could use a nutritional check-in, please consider sharing this video with them today. It might be exactly the nudge they need to bring up a simple blood test at their next appointment. And if you have not subscribed to Longevity Insight yet, now is a great time to do it. We are building a community here focused on clear, practical, science-based guidance for staying strong, sharp, and independent at every stage of life, with more videos on heart health, bone health, and brain health already on the channel and plenty more on the way. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload, and I will see you in the next video. Here's to fueling your body well, one nutrient-rich meal at a time.